Hello, welcome to Season 2 of Pursuing the Muse. I'm Tom Compton, your host and confidant here. I'd like to say I'm very excited this time around. We got Jon Nolan from Say Zuzu coming into the podcast studio to talk about music. Jon has been around for a long time. Say Zuzu was making a string of runs back in the 90s, putting out 8 or 9 records. Peers along the likes of Wilco and Old 97s and Uncle Tupelo. And then in 2003, the band broke up and went their separate ways, raised families, etc. Come along 2019, they get an offer from a record label to get back together and reunite, and they do so. And that wound up producing 2023's amazing album, No Time to Lose by Say Zuzu. So I'm very excited to talk to Jon about Say Zuzu, about the solo stuff he's put out in between Say Zuzu stints and currently as well. So without further ado, let's welcome Jon Nolan. All right, Tom Compton here with Pursuing the Muse. It's Season 2, and Jon Nolan is in the studio. So excited to have you here, Jon. How are you doing tonight?
Doing great. Really, really happy here to be here to chat about songs, songwriting, nerd out, in any number of directions.
Nerd out. We're in the right place. All right. So tell me a little bit how you got started writing songs back in the day.
Yeah. How did I get started writing songs back in the day? Well, my mom's side of the family is pretty musical, and I think the first musical experiences were around the campfire, up in Maine, that kind of thing. My Uncle Tom played guitar. My mom's one of 7, so there were a lot of siblings at that generation. There were a lot of, they all came up in the 60s and the 60s folk era and all that kind of stuff. There was a lot of singing growing up. And so music was just a part woven throughout my youthful experiences. And I actually just created a playlist on Spotify called Hitting the Sleep Button on my first digital clock radio, because I got one of those early 80s clock radios. And it was, I just fell in love with it. I fell in love falling to sleep to the radio. Shortly thereafter, stole my dad's, the stereo system, the fancy stereo system he bought when he got out of Vietnam. I think a lot of soldiers coming back were sort of enticed with little deals on awesome tube receivers, etc. And it sat lonely behind our couch in our living room for years, and they had like 10 records, and I stole that and put it in my room. And so there was a love of music, a deep connection with it, that just, I think, naturally lent itself to, hey, can I have a guitar? My parents were skeptical, and they bought me a piece of crap guitar. And I hated having homework for my guitar teacher. And it's a longer story to how I got into songwriting. But then I actually had a really traumatic hand accident in shop when I was 12, and I cut 3 fingers off. And it was actually... I took 2 surgeries to sort of put my hand back together and get it working right. But it was actually being really frustrated with my hand that really drove me to play guitar. Wow. And I wrote one song. I played it for my brother and our mutual best friend, Cliff Murphy. And the band Say Zuzu was born. And we were together from that, like the weekend following that debut of that song until 2003, until our reuniting almost 20 years later. So there you go.
That's amazing. That's like an instant, like, like you put the, you got the Mentos and you put it in the Diet Coke and it immediately.
Yes, it went everywhere just like that. just as
So how
messy.
old were you at that point?
Oh, so I wrote my first song when I was 14, 14 years old. It was a crappy love song, Tom. It's awesome. I can still play it for you today. I will not, but yeah, it was just, I was really just enamored with being able to make sounds on the guitar and write and sing. It was like magic. And James, my brother, who played bass in Say Zuzu for many years, and our pal Cliff Murphy, I taught them the one song that I knew to play, mine, and we started furiously writing songs. We grabbed a drummer in high school and formed a band, but the problem was that we were terrible guitar players, so we couldn't figure out how to play other people's stuff. And that actually drove us to write our own because
A blessing in disguise.
it was, yeah, we booked a gig and we are like, oh no, we have to fill the time and we can't figure out all this complicated stuff. So we wrote a whole slew of songs. It's really like what jump started the whole thing, and a handful of them stuck around.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Now, those early days, were you in like high school gyms, dances, or things like that? Or?
Yeah. It was the sad dance, the Students Against Drunk Driving, right? The sad dance at St. Thomas Aquinas High School cafeteria. And March 3rd, 1989 was our first gig. And we played Newmarket High School, the Newmarket High School cafeteria. I think it was just a regular dance, not a sad dance. That was our second gig. And we played like a pizza place and a pool party, that kind of thing.
Nice. And then, so you were mentioning that you were around campfires in Maine. Right now you're in New Hampshire, right? Did you grow up
That's
in
right.
Maine and then later relocate?
No, I'm in the area where I pretty much grew up, Newmarket, New Hampshire, near Portsmouth, about an hour north of Boston, an hour south of Portland, Maine. And but my mother's family is largely settled in about 90 minutes north of here. And so my great grandfather built a log cabin on a lake, and the family shares it as a place to retreat to in the summertime.
Okay. Just no big migration.
No big migration. No.
Okay. So now I'm sort of a latecomer to Say Zuzu because I didn't find you guys until a year ago with the reunion album.
Yeah.
So I think maybe it'd be good to get a high level of your career because I mean, Say Zuzu had a lot of albums.
We did.
Before the hiatus, correct?
That's true. Yeah. I think we made 9. A couple of them you won't be able to find, and that's good. Because they're terrible. The early ones. But yeah, that first song I played for James and Cliff started us as an ensemble, and we had a few drummers until James and Cliff finished college, and then we had a guy join, and we started recording and touring and traveling, playing regionally first, and then touring. But yeah, we put out in the scheme of things between 92 and 2003, 9 records, including a couple live records. One was a domestic live record. Another one was live from one of our tours in Germany. And, took the pantry of influences that we already had and sort of connected with what they called alt country in the 90s, and Americana is maybe the more updated term. Now, Uncle Tupelo, eventually Sunvolt Wilco, Jayhawks, Marat, Whiskey Town, all that stuff, old 97s, really got tapped into outlaw country and old country and various rock influences, and just really felt connected to those traditions merging, and that influenced and informed us as a band and all the things we did.
A lot of those guys were your peers at that point. What, as a songwriter, who would you say you were looking up to or trying to be influenced by?
I'd say, and it's a funny thing. It's interesting to be asked about my songwriting, by the way, Tom. I don't think about my songwriting until somebody asks me a great question like that. I think if I was saying I was going to chase somebody else's style, it would probably be something like between Neil Young and Jeff Tweedy. I don't know that you hear that in my stuff. I think there are a lot of influences that were more ingrained in me that I less deliberately was informed less deliberately and consciously by. I think Tom Petty shows up more than I intended, and Mellencamp and maybe Dylan. But yeah, in those sort of in the days where we were an active band and touring and those kinds of things, we were really we were in love with Uncle Tupelo and Neil Young, and then eventually Sunbolt and Wilco. But so Tweedy and Neil Young, I guess.
Right. And I mean, it's interesting because you're kind of filtering a whole bunch of stuff, and then it comes out as you. But yeah,
right.
I mean,
right.
Even Neil Young doesn't sound like Neil Young sometimes. I mean, that one.
Totally. I feel. Is it weird for me to ask a question back?
Sure. No, it's not weird.
Right? So, what kind of answers do you hear when you ask the kind of question you did? Like, what songwriters?
Usually it's a boom like names, and it becomes almost, and then my brain starts like, oh my God, that's too much information. So, you're spacing it out. Helped me a lot.
All right. Well, good. I'll be honest. I have felt like an ugly duckling amongst my peers. I feel like I have consumed music. My relationship with music is different. I feel like I've just had a different experience than a lot. What I perceive, I could be wrong. And when all the times that I have been writing, and my initial connection to music in the first place was really, if I'm honest, it was just from a place of like survival. And where I come from, my life history was this thing I just grabbed onto. I felt deeply connected to it. And I had an experience listening to other people's music. It was really deep and important. And when I started writing songs, I would have kind of two extreme experiences, especially in those early to mid 90s experiences with Say Zuzu. I'll just put this out there. There would be these, I'd go and see a live band, a local band, a regional band, or even a touring band. And I would be super inspired and I'd want to run home and kind of capture that inspiration. Other times I'd just be, and those times, frankly, never usually worked out because I was usually trying to do something like I had just heard. I was like, that's awesome. Let me go try and do that. So it'd be this really good feeling, this infusion of inspiration. I'd come home and I'd try and, I think in retrospect, be like somebody else. And it usually wouldn't work. The times where songs have sort of bubbled up and have resulted in a finished song which has stuck around are the times where I kind of grab the wheel a little less tightly. And that wasn't necessarily how I understood what was happening at the time.
Okay.
You know what I mean? So in my 20s and in particular, I was deeply inspired by others, and I would try when my inspiration freed me up to say who I was is when it worked the best. But I've never been able to go through a Dylan phase and then like you hear other songwriters where they say, oh, I hear they're listening to Dylan now, and now they're listening to Waylon, and now they're listening to blah blah blah. I just every time that I've tried to do that, I just can't stick around. I just get itchy.
Right.
And I need to move on.
Seems like doesn't seem like it would be as authentic to try and impersonate something.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not throwing shade at that either. I mean, I think like, for instance, like in high school, right? Everybody, or not everybody, but I have teenagers now. I just watched it happen again. I think everybody, can I pull off a jean jacket? Right? Like I think, right? You literally try on some styles and you try and figure out who you are. And I think it's natural to do that musically. And again, I could be wrong. I just feel like my experience I've never had the patience to sit down and learn in the past somebody else's licks, somebody else's solo note for note. I've never really tried to inhabit a deep dive into somebody else's thing.
Mm-hmm.
For whatever reason. But Tweety was particularly in those 90s, like a constant sort of hero of mine. There was something in his writing that really I felt was vulnerable and somehow direct, but also left enough room for a variety of interpretations that I related with.
And maybe that's the modeling you needed, is like just being vulnerable at a high level, and you know, those little breadcrumbs that you can follow and find yourself at the end of the trail.
Yeah. Yep. Mm-hmm. There's a lot more self-compassion in my songwriting now too, by the way, for what that's worth. You know, music, having, you know, Zuzu played and then broke up in 2003. And it was the least boring breakup in rock and roll history. There was nothing, sadly, there was no scandalous story we could dig up now to our benefit. There was no sex, drugs, and rock and roll. There was rock and roll, I guess, the sex and the drugs, not so much. You know, we were married and, you know, we gave it a shot. And then I went on to put out a couple solo records, and I had a recording studio and, you know, just getting on with the business of raising a family and stuff. And then there was a period where I didn't write songs because I was going back to school, and I was sort of heartbroken and had sort of hit a wall with my relationship with music. And since Zuzu has reunited, thanks to the great Sterling Bones Records and one of the great good guys in the industry, George Fontaine Sr., now that we're back and I'm feeling joy with it, I'm harvesting all of those earlier, younger experiences, and I'm jealously guarding the joy around the music now. So that's where the self-compassion comes in. And I take my time a lot more. I'm going to stop there so you don't have to listen to me speak in paragraphs before you get to it.
Oh, the whole point is to listen to you speak.
Okay.
But now, with the layoff of 17 years, and you're talking about your approach to it now, do you have a mature appreciation of what's the opportunity you have now with songs and live music?
Yeah, I do. I think so much has changed since Say Zuzu broke up in 2003. I mean, just so much. We all know, right? All the things. I mean, really, the modern internet was still in its infancy. The phones we have now, the way we connect, the rhythm of life. It's post-pandemic. Here we are, you and I, on a Zoom, right? Like, this would have been pretty exotic in 2019, right? But now we're like, yep, just going to Zoom call with somebody. You know, like, so much has changed. And so it's not just the time. It's the conditions in which sort of revisiting it means that, and I've been talking with this with my bandmates, my Jon Nolan and Good Company. I have a solo band too, a lot lately, and which is that I think there's a lot of whatever the old music industry is no more, but the infrastructure is still there, and it kind of feels like it's still there. And so a lot of us of a particular age are still acting like it's still there. And not only are we behaving that way, like going out to the same clubs and promoting in the same ways, but on top of this sort of malaise, it doesn't feel the same to go to the local clubs anyway. I'll get to the point of the question you asked. I guess it's the other side of that is the freedom. Like, I don't have to, I can just put down, where am I headed? Where am I going to make it, quote unquote? You know, all that stuff is happily not even, I won't say it's a consideration because, you know, you never know, right? Like, you could get placed in a TV or something, but even that isn't, quote, making it, right? There's no version of history that includes me with a hit worldwide or anything. So it's like, well, then what am I doing? And I think what I'm doing is I'm trying to capture some joy on the couch when I sit down to write a song, trying to please myself, trying to connect with what I'm doing. Then I'm trying to bring it to my own band and connecting there and find some joy. And if we can find some joy and really dig what we're doing and bringing the song to life and supporting the song, which my band and Zuzu too, we just live in different states. It's harder to do as often. If we can support a song, then we have done it. We've done it. And that is just a wholly different series of events than, 20 years ago when I was in a working band trying to carve out a humble living and needed to do all the things to support that. It wasn't a purely artistic consideration. It was logistical, financial. There were timing and involved and all sorts of considerations, like what's the next right move to grow the empire, whatever that meant at that time. And that can't help but affect how you experience sitting down to write a song when there's a lot of, better be a good frickin' song, like
a lot of pressure on you.
Yeah, because you got to make tens upon twenties of dollars, So I tend to swear. Would you rather that I don't? I haven't yet.
I just put a little E next to the thing when it's explicit episode.
All right. Well, I will. I've been doing okay so far. I think all I've uttered is crap. But I can't promise anything. So yeah, it's different, but it's also an old habit to want to take music and songs and blow it up into something bigger and more pressure infused than it needs to be.
Mm-hmm. Just for the fun of it, or just because that's a habit?
It's a habit to want to, well, I don't know what part's a habit. I think a lot of the habits are thoughts. About, for instance, I'm making a solo record right now, and my bass player Jeff Taylor is co-producing it. We've worked together, and he co-produced my last solo record too. And there was this period where we were recording songs, and then we did a session or two, and then we got to the summer, and some of the songs are really sad and kind of slow. I can speak to a little breakthrough I had in relation to from 20 years ago to now too, and there was this moment where we were about to play some gigs, and I was like, who's going to want to listen to a bunch of sad, slow songs, And then these slightly more up-tempo songs suddenly came into the mix, and they were part of the album, quote unquote. And it took us the whole summer of playing to be like, no, they're not part of the album. The more honest thing is to honor the center. If you still believe in albums like we do, I do, and that's a valid artistic format, then that's what we're doing. Those other songs are fine songs, and they're on the shelf. They just don't belong with this particular collection.
Okay.
So I think it's a habit. Like, what do we win? What do we win if we put the fast songs on there? Are we going to sell more units, Tom? Like, is Madison Square Garden going to call? There's only consideration is like, what are we doing? And it's like, if we can dig it, let's bring it out in public. And the people who dig it, love you, come back. The other people, maybe find somebody else to listen to.
Mm. Right.
Right. And that's new for me, because I want to be liked. I want people to like my stuff.
That's everybody wants that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think I just played a couple gigs this weekend, and I have a new rule for myself, which is I had a bootleg. It's a great sounding bootleg, except I was like, dang it, Nolan, shut up. I thought, like, in between songs. And the new rule for me is speak when I'm comfortable, not to get comfortable.
Ah. That's a sensei kind of tip right there.
Right? I think I do the opposite. Anyway, in my brain, all these things are connected. The songwriting, the thing I'm trying to cultivate in that, and how it manifests in the live show, and those kinds of things. So there are a lot of things that have changed in 20 years, including the fact that, I have said in some way or another, many of the songs I wrote from the first song until that last Zuzu record, or even my first solo record are Born to Run. In one way or another, that same sort of youthful naivete spirit informs them. Sort of I don't know, baby, we'll figure it out. Let's throw the suitcase in the trunk and hit the road. Like, let's throw caution to the wind. Mm-hmm. And you can't really write that when you're 50. Not authentically, not if you're dipping into your own personal, like I do, even if I'm not writing a song directly from my experience, I can't write that, you can't write Born to Run when you're 50. You can't. And go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead.
No, I was going to say in the pandemic, the bug hit and I hadn't been writing and I was like, oh my goodness, I feel like writing and recording. And I pulled out this little recording rig and I started, and I was pleased to find out I had zero shortage of musical ideas. All these songs came out and I was like, nice, I'm back. And then I went to write lyrics and it all dried up. And I went, crap, I guess I'm still in the same sort of hurt place. A few months later is when George called with that Say Zuzu record deal. And it was the thing that I and my bandmates had pined for all those years. And now it was back and it was really exciting. And then as soon as we signed on the deal, I was like, the excitement kind of faded a little bit. This is going to sound really like it's a Cadillac problem. I'm just going to get out front of it. I was like, oh crap, now I have to write some songs. I was really pleased, but then I felt all that pressure again. I was like, oh no. And what I found in that process was I did have something to say. Apparently I just didn't want to say it.
Oh.
And that was the breakthrough. Once I kept trying to write Born to Run, and old guy me and my subconscious is like, you can't write Born to Run, dude. You can't write that kind of song. That's not where you're at. It was inauthentic.
Mm-hmm.
So, am I making sense? Is that track? You understand what I'm driving at?
Yeah, it seems like it's almost a turning point, crossroads moment where an entire new universe of material unfolded that you can tap into.
100%.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, it was scary, honestly. It was
I think the song should be a little scary when you're writing.
Man, preach it. You're not wrong. 100%. Absolutely. So that was a big moment. And after I became willing to just let it fly in a new way, once I recognized I was trying to go back to the comfort place of what I knew to write, and I was like, oh wait, I need to allow myself to write what's happening now, how I'm feeling now. The floodgates opened, and well, God, what a relief, it's been such a relief. So that's changed a lot.
Okay. From what you were describing about all the music you had and then going to write lyrics, are you generally a music first guy and then you add lyrics on?
Historically, yeah. Historically, I've done, I think, what a lot of people do, which is if you're, the instrument of choice, pick up my guitar, find some chords, find something that's musically intriguing, and then sing some sort of nonsensical, non-Englishy something,
the big cliche is McCartney with yesterday starting as ham and eggs, right?
Exactly. It's right. Except I wouldn't sing words, I just sing blah, 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 blah. I have a whole phone full of them. And it's probably the language they sing in the cantina in Star Wars, whatever I'm singing, and I would try and find a melody and some phrasing that way. And that's historically how I have written the vast, vast majority of the songs. I tried to, at some point in the 90s, I thought other people do it this other way, so I have to try and do that. Again, forced pressure, forced fun, and I might have a song or two that was the case. However, just recently, in the spirit of the helpful question, who says I have to do it that way? I have been capturing, like every person on earth, I think, songs on my iPhone audio notes app. And then I have a notes app, your listeners won't be able to see, where I would just think of a lyric, or somebody would say something, I'd be like, ooh, cool. And I'll just go into the notes app and I'll write it. And then I'll just try and write a couple more lines. I have some succinct bullet points for your listeners if they find them useful at this juncture. So I will give them to you now.
Get your pens
out. Yeah, that's right. I realized that I had been self-editing pretty judgmentally for the vast majority of my songwriting career. And that there were many, many songs where I'd be like, cool. And I'd start to like, jam on something and write it. And then I'd be like, no, that's stupid. I don't write songs like that. Or like, it wasn't the right genre, or it was too like 80s Bryan Adams, who I, by the way, love. I will argue the merits of Bryan Adams' Reckless. All right. It's a great pop record. Anyway, I would write songs, right? And they weren't cool, or whatever they were. They weren't the right genre. And so I wouldn't write them. And what I realized is that I've been practicing not finishing. So now one of my rules for myself is write the songs that come. Get practice just finishing. I don't have to do anything with it. You can just live on my phone.
Mm-hmm.
Or just go on the scrap heap.
Okay.
Maybe I just need the Fender from that crap song. I can pull it off and use it somewhere else. So
if you got the musical ideas in the app, and then you got the notebook of lyrics, are you sometimes like smushing them together? Or
I totally am. Yeah. So I'll have a promising musical things, get promising musical ideas. Those generally stick with me pretty good. I know I'm like, oh yeah, I like that. That happens a lot. I have songs I remember from 20 years ago that haven't found a home yet. Musical ideas. But then as new things come up, a new tone, a new guitar makes me play different. And so I'm capturing all those things. And then every once in a while, I'll just scroll through the lyrics that I've written and pull it out and plug it in to one of the ideas. I'll pick the most promising musical idea, and then I'll go through the lyrics and find out like which of these seems to match. So it's been less one kind of writing, less one strum and sing nonsense until something appears, and more like taking the pressure off and putting the ideas down that I have, writing the lyrics that I have, and then smushing them together. So write the songs that come is one of them now. That's a new sort of bullet point for me. Just practice finishing. Like, again, what do I have to lose? What happens if I write a crappy song? God knows there are lots of crappy songs, I can only write the good songs. Like, which ones are those? Right. Maybe other people out there have had the same experience that I have. I have lots of songs I've recorded that on my phone, or even I have a recording gear on the studio, and I listen to them like 5 years later. I'm like, damn, it's cool.
Mm.
I just was freaked out by it. Maybe I was too far ahead of myself. Mm-hmm. There's some stylistic songs I have recorded. I'm like, oh shit, that's really cool. I wish 2005 me had the stones to put that out. That would have been a different experience. I still can, so write the songs that come. Whatever you practice, you get good at, is the sort of the accompaniment to that one, which is sort of practice finishing.
Very cool.
If you practice criticizing yourself, you get really good at that too.
Another sensei drop there.
I'm just saying, these are not born from my comfort. I offer them to you and your listeners.
You need a little meditation book to publish there or something.
Here they are, man. Find my Substack. I'm trying to put them there.
Your Substack is awesome, by the way.
Thank you.
I do subscribe, and it is probably my favorite of all the Substacks.
Nice. Man.
Good stuff.
Really appreciate it. Yeah, it's called Long Story Medium, and now you know why.
Even the name is a sensei drop there. So
yeah, you're like, it's from Jeff Taylor. I asked him, I'm like, he says that all the time. But I'm like, can I use that? He's like, yeah. So you ask me what time it is, and I tell you how to build a watch, as they say. So
there you go. Mm-hmm. So you're talking about, matching lyrics in music, and I would kick myself if I didn't asked to deep dive in one of your songs that just the first time I heard it, it blew me away. And I think I may have reached out to you with a piece of fan mail about when I heard the first time I heard As Much Love. I was like, this song is so good. I wish I wrote it. So
Wow.
can you deep dive a little bit the genesis of that song?
Absolutely. The deep dive of that song is that it's true. That you can only accept as much love as you think you deserve. And, you know, my day job is working in the mental health field and the substance use disorder field. And I'm on the slow road towards my master's clinical licensure. So I think about these kinds of things all the time on both sides of the experience, right? As somebody who endeavors to help others and as somebody who has been helped by others. And so the shortest version, and you can ask me anything about it, is I got my ass kicked, Tom. Really, I just had a spot where there was something that happened shortly before I wrote that song that ripped open kind of an old wound, and I had a moment where I recognized that that a lot of thoughts are habits, and thoughts affect how you feel. Thoughts affect, feelings carry stories, right? I'm a piece of crap, or whatever story it is you believe about, or one believes about themselves, right? The things happen to us when we get thought habits, stories come along. And I just engaged with one of the old scripts, as they would say. Like, I had something happen, it was really hurt, and I had this moment, this fork in the road moment, where I was basically saying to myself, I don't have to believe in that. It's just had a moment of like, ow. And I know it viscerally feels like one thing, but I understand that it's a different thing. And I was just reminding myself, and then sort of teasing that idea out and trying to paint a couple little anecdotes in the song that illuminated it, rather than writing a diary page or something. So often,
great imagery, like looking into
people get what they want, and it doesn't bring about what they hope. And it's because, I'll say to my recovery peeps, once you put the plug in the jug or you put the bag down, it's not bottles and bags, it's beliefs. The recovery game is about challenging beliefs. If you believe you're a piece of crap, and that's the story, you'll just bring that everywhere, and you'll look for evidence of that. Even when love is like right there in front of you, you won't be able to see it. So that's the bridge of the song. I've been trying to place this image of like, being on the outside of the proverbial glass looking in, like looking in on this moment of warmth and comfort, and the thing that you wanted is right there with you, but you're so focused on what you think it has to look like that you miss it. So what else about that song comes to mind for you?
Is that one where you had like the chords sitting around and they were waiting for the message, or?
No, that was one that came out pretty much in a single sitting. It's one of those lucky ones, as I remember, where I was just kind of in it, and I was banging on the guitar, and I got through a verse and the chorus, and I was like, okay, now I know what it is, and I wrote the rest. As I remember, I don't know that it was, if it wasn't in a single sitting, it happened over a day or two, and it was a crystallized idea in my mind once I got into it,
Right. Yeah. Earlier you mentioned the analogy of letting go of the wheel, and it seems like what you're describing is a good example of what happens when you let go of the wheel.
Yeah. I mean, here's another one from that record. The very first song, a song called Waking Up, was a song that I had come up with. I'll try and find it as we speak. I came up with the guitar part, and I dropped the D on my guitar, and came with this little simple strummy hook, and I liked it a lot, and so I kept going, and I started doing that sensical, sing-songy thing. And then I sang the first line of the song as it exists. And then I sang the second song of the song as it exists. And then I sang the third song, and suddenly I sang like improv 3 lines, and I was like, "Oh, it sounds good." And so I just kept going. And then I didn't know what the chorus was until I went to an E minor 7, and I was like, "Cool, me, good job, me. That's a good change. I like that change." And then I sang, "Waking up feels like falling down." And then I listened back to it, and I went, "Holy crap! It's also where I'm at." Like, that was a moment of my subconscious in my mind saying, "Hey, I'd like to say something. If you'd maybe stop thinking so much, we could get it out there." I mean, I listened back to it and I was like, damn, I understood what I was singing, but I wasn't, there's no woo-woo stuff. It's not like ghosts or anything. I just, the power of the subconscious, just letting go. And so that was a really, second verse I wrote, I wrote it with me and my subconscious wrote that second verse. But it felt really, so I connect with that song, a lot, like the editor showed up on that one too, Tom, and I wanted to be like, well, let's fuck with it. But no, let's not. When I listen to it by myself, when I listen to that song by myself and I think, I forget that anybody else has heard it, I'm deeply pleased with how that song came out. Just deeply pleased.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever I think about other, songwriters thinking about my songs, sometimes I'm like, oh, is that the right kind of song? Will the songwriters like my songs? That's none of my business. Like, I remember it's a related thing, but years ago we played an industry showcase thing in Nashville. And Buddy Miller, great guitar player, played with Emmylou Harris and Spy Boy and Buddy and Julie Miller. Have a bunch of great, just a fantastic guitar player. And he came and sat down in the front row, and my hands turned to stone. I couldn't play guitar. Like, I was just like, oh God, I got the yips big time. And it was a funny moment we all laughed about. But yeah, it's just a helpful moment for me to realize,
pressure.
well, yeah, but I mean, and even now when I'm listening to a live recording, even a phone recording of a rehearsal, never mind a show, when I start thinking, I stop musicking. That's just how it goes with me. The best is when I'm just letting it happen, less hanging onto the wheel. I was going to say, it's not just like straight Neil Young. Like, I think sometimes he just lets it fly. And I'm not talking about, I don't always do that. It's kind of like a collaboration between letting it fly and craft, So anyway,
yeah, there is skill involved. You definitely are bringing craft. So otherwise, there'd be a lot more people up there doing stuff in front of Buddy Miller. It takes some craft to get to that point. So when you were describing waking up, coming, it almost sounded like it was an out of body experience. Like you surprised yourself.
Totally.
How often does that happen?
I've had 2 experiences. The only time I've ever experienced anything like waking up was that song. That's it. I sang a thing. I thought it made sense. I was listening back, I think, more for phrasing and melody. I was like, oh, cool. What did I do? Like, whatever it was cool. I'm so glad I hit record. And then I heard the words that I sang, and I was like, oh. So yeah, it was a really kind of a weird experience. I was surprised. The other one was another helpful little self-editor moment. In case it's not completely clear to your listeners, me and self-criticism, old pals, right? So I try and gently set the self-critic down.
Mhm.
I got a new amplifier. So you talk about out of body experience. I don't know if it was out of body, but it was a surprise to listen back to Waking Up. But I recently got a new amplifier like a year and a half ago, and I was enjoying playing it and captured another idea on my phone. And I've been practicing guitar, and I forgot to stop recording, and I kept playing. And unbeknownst to me, when I went back to check out that idea in the car, it was kind of like pocket calling myself, you know? I like listened in on me when I didn't plan on recording it, you know? And it was another good moment of like, I had this gap between what I remembered of the experience playing it in real time and what I heard. And what I heard, because I didn't know to expect to hear it, was better than I remembered playing. Do you
Cool.
follow? And so I was like, oh, I should, after it was another experience of like, man, just relax, just ease up, like stop judging, just have some fun, dig the tone of your amp.
Yeah, don't be so hard on yourself.
Yeah. I mean, just to be clear, I'm not, it's not digging ditches or pulling teeth to write and play songs. I just want to kind of go to the places where I think people get stuck sometimes and say, yes, me too. I get it. It's possible to pull up out of those experiences.
Mm-hmm. So when you were talking about As Much Love, you were mentioning how it's in the world of recovery in the lyrics. So you have a sobriety journey. At what point did you sober up? And as a follow-up, how has that impacted songwriting?
I'll start with the second part first. It allows me to write songs. I was not one of those people who had a long history of like pulling it together when I was drinking. You know, like it was a lot of talking about playing music and a lot of drinking. And now it's the opposite. It's a lot of talking about drinking and a lot of actually making music. So it was actually 30 years ago in March that I was really, really lucky. I found the right sort of crew of people that I got connected with in my early 20s. And it's the best gift I've ever given to myself. I think when I look back, those things you do when you're like 15 or 16, and when you get older, you're like, oh my God, I can't believe we survived it. That's how I think about my entry into the recovery community. I think if I hadn't met the people that I met and hadn't gone down exactly that way, maybe we wouldn't be talking. I don't know what I'd be doing. So I was really blessed. So recovery has just been something that has been an important part of my life since 1994. And that was right when we started doing the band full time. So it was like kind of perfectly timed. They weren't connected. It was just how it worked out. My co-frontman Cliff never drank, so I just had some built-in support. Some people in his family had struggled with it, and he just made the decision early on he wasn't going to fool around with it. So that was really lucky. If I had been like a hard drinking band, maybe I would have been drinking. I don't know, but that lifestyle and all the things that it means to cultivate contented sobriety have informed my songs deeply, because it's informed my life deeply, and it's all over the place. So many songs.
Right. Yeah, it sounds like you weren't really as much of a songwriter while drinking.
No.
I mean, your history sober is such at this point that really it might even be hard to think of writing songs.
Yeah, no, I mean, I've had friends that have gotten sober, and they basically, I think famously, like Stevie Ray Vaughan had to like learn to play guitar again for a minute. There's such a thing as state dependent learning. Like a lot of people learned drunk or high, and when they got sober, it like took their brain a minute to understand what the hell was happening. So I'm really lucky in that regard. I don't really have. I did write songs before recovery. It was hard to tell which ones are crappy because I was drunk, and which ones are crappy because they were some of the first songs I wrote. I don't know.
Right.
But yeah,
It's a hard comparison to make because of the circumstances.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you've been mentioning Cliff a bit. Cliff Murphy, the co-frontman of Say Zuzu. Do you co-write with him, or do you both bring in your own finished pieces to the band, or is it a mix of both?
Finished pieces. A couple co-writes that we tried. They were. We both would say that they're not great songs. I think that's a different kind of relational discipline that we didn't feel enough need or urgency for, so we just never practiced that particular flavor of collaboration. But what we do have is that's really special, that you can't always have, is we give each other notes. So if I give him a song or he gives me a song, we have developed enough trust and comfort and common language that we can get right down to business and without harming the relationship. We're like old trusted pals who love each other. And so he can say I think one of them is like, I like where you're headed more than I like the song, And from somebody who didn't have that level of trust, you might be like, ow, I will never share anything with you again. But, he was right. There was a song on the new record that I won't get into, but there was a lyric that I showed to him, and I was like, I don't think this is going to land the way that you think that it is. And he was like, oh my goodness. When I told him like how I was hearing, he was like, ooh, that saved, yeah, it could have been easily misinterpreted. Never mind just the normal run of the mill, stuff. So that's where we've collaborated, has been, and sometimes I'll give him a note, or he'll give me a note, and I'll be like, cool, thank you. Like, noted. I like it. And it stays, I don't think there's ever been
you sharpen each other's saws.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've been listening to Paul McCartney's podcast where he's talking about songwriting, and it's some guy, like, they wrote a book about 150 of his songs, Life and Lyrics. And so there's a podcast, and they'll talk. It's basically recordings of the ghostwriter's notes to make the book, and so they're just sharing them episodically. But I've noticed that when I hear Paul talk about songs, and he'll talk about Wings, and he'll talk about the Beatles, that a benefit that I didn't realize as much as I should have was that what you're describing with Cliff and giving each other notes is, I think, what Jon did for Paul, filtering out some fluff, made 100%. His Beatles material so wonderful. And Wings wasn't bad or anything, but it wasn't as spot on consistently. And I think Jon was a huge part of that. I think you guys do that for each other.
Yeah, I mean, I even like some solo Sting, but I think that's a Sting problem too. I think he did better in the Police. I don't think conflict is necessary for a sharpened artistic process, but you got to have somebody you trust. I do believe. I think producers can play that part. Certainly. Yeah. Sometimes I don't know how strongly I feel about a thing until somebody says I shouldn't do that. And it's not just being oppositional. It's not just being contrarian. Sometimes I'm like, no, like, part of me wants to advocate for it, but sometimes your friends will say, Cliff has set me free. Something I knew, I just couldn't acknowledge to myself. I was enamored with the chorus or something. And, it is the thing. What's the name of that podcast? I want to check it out. The Paul McCartney podcast.
Life and Lyrics.
I'll check it out.
It's a Life and Lyrics. Yeah.
What else can I offer you about songwriting, Tom? What else is of curiosity to you? I feel like I'm just yapping.
Oh no, I'm loving it. This is wonderful. I see we might be coming towards a logical closing point. So why don't we uh, put a little bow on things, and we'll talk about what's currently happening with your music. If you're talking about you got a new record, you got any timeline for that coming down the pike, so we can watch for it, and then where we can learn more about you.
Yeah, it sounds great. Yeah, so my I've got 2 Jon Nolan records on your favorite streaming services. They're at least on Spotify. Sometimes get a little weird. And I'm a Jon, John.
It's on Amazon. They're on Amazon too.
Yep. Yeah, 2 records. When the Summer's Lasted Long and Everything Has Changed. And then my new solo stuff is with my band. It's Jon Nolan and Good Company. So I think people can look for that name showing up. Optimistically, the fall, I think, is what we're hoping when that record will drop. Jon Nolan NH is my Instagram handle. That is the most sort of up to date in terms of like letting things know. JonNolan.net is where you can find me. You can go to my, needs to be updated website. And, at some point before the record drops, we'll have a new site landing there. So people can stay tuned and join the mailing list. My Substack is Long Story Medium. So if you want to find that, put in my name and look for that on Substack. Love to see anybody, anywhere they want to join me out in the digital universe and stay connected. And there are little clips.
There are many paths that lead to.
There are. Yeah, Instagram, I guess, feels the most like active and vibrant place to get a feel for what I'm up to with my friends.
Yeah. Twitter's no fun anymore.
It is not. It's not even called Twitter anymore. No. Threads is. I know, me too. I won't call it X, right?
It's like when they changed the Sears Tower to the Willis Tower. I'm still calling it the Sears Tower.
Yeah, it's the Sears Tower. 100%. Totally.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah. So, but it's a pleasure to have an opportunity to talk about all this stuff, man. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you for coming on. All right, we'll wrap it up here, and we will be back again next time. So thank you, Jon.
Yeah, thank you, Tom.